Again, we always try to be more like France.
Yeah.
We rely more on the top, the wealthy in our country, than even France.
Sweden, Germany, you name the socialist country, we rely more heavily on our wealthy Americans than any. Now, California is even more extreme. 84 cents out of every dollar of income tax collected in California comes from households earning over $100,000 a year. Families earning under $50,000 a year pay 2% of the state's income taxes. You can basically say if you earn up to $50,000 a year in California, you will pay no state income taxes, which means that they have this vast class of people in that state that are essentially disconnected from the costs of government. As a result, they will demand ever more services and spending from government because they will never ever feel the cost of that because they have passed it up to someone else higher up the food chain.
Yeah, I think this is, California is supposed to be the land where anything's possible, and I think people in California have convinced themselves that they can have a big government like in New Jersey or New York without having to pay for it. And that's why they repeatedly haven't balanced budgets. It's why they keep growing spending so fast. But it's not going to be sustainable in the current recession with this idea that you just rely on the top 1% to pay for everything.
Troy, how much trouble is the state in? Or let me rephrase this. How happy were the state officials when they thought universal health care was coming so they could take all of the illegal immigrants off of any kind of, they get all the hospitals and everything paid for by the federal government. That's got to be an enormous burden on the state.
Oh, sure. I mean, anytime that we can get the federal government to pay for anything in California, we're delighted to do it because we do spend to such excess.
Well, they're doing it.
Part of our
didn't they just pick up the prison system in California too? Didn't the federal government come in and pick up at least a good portion of the prison system this week?
Well, we've had an ongoing court fight over the years with the federal government over the prisons in California, and we try to shift as many of those costs as possible. And it's just one of the ways to get around real reform. And one of the reasons that real reform is so difficult is that the way our budget is structured, and this has a lot to do with ballot initiatives over the years, somewhere between 65 to 80% of our entire state budget is totally outside of the responsibility of the legislature. It's mandated through initiatives and it's written into the California Constitution.
Unbelievable.
So you're talking, try balancing your family budget with 15 cents on every dollar.
Can't be done. Can't be done.
Right.
All right, we're going to come back in just a second. We're going to look at the other progressive states that are in trouble next. Just looking at that list, which of the following states are right to work? The failing, California is not a right to work. Rhode Island, Michigan, Nevada is failing, but it is a right to work state. It is a failing state, but it is a right to work state, right? Oregon is not a right to work state. It's truly amazing when you look at these. The majority is. If you have a right to work, you have a better chance of succeeding. And that's because, look, can we start in Michigan? Here's a state that's on fire. It is sad. I was up in Michigan and I was speaking for with the Michigan Chamber of Commerce, and it is the business people know. They know. You can't run a state this way. You have to be able to be business friendly. Look what happened to the car manufacturers. That's progressive policy after progressive policy, both on bad management, federal government, state government, and unions. How much of a role does a union play in the death or health of a state? Anybody?
Well, I think, in Michigan, it's certainly a long story of decline. Michigan's actually been in a recession since the start of the last recession. They're on their 10th consecutive year of a shrinking economy. But their problems are a long time in coming. It's been an auto industry that's been stagnant for 50 years. The influence of the United Auto Workers drove up production costs and discouraged innovation and allowed Japanese and European competitors to come in and overtake them. But I don't know what you can do as a Michigan legislator now to fix that. This is a problem that's been going for so long. Now their policy mix, I'd say, is close to the middle of the road. Their tax system is actually not so terrible, but when your fundamental industry, you have all your eggs in one basket, and that basket is no good, it's really hard for your state to overcome that. And so many of these things are long-term problems. Maybe California now is where Michigan was 25 years ago, where now they have the chance to fix their policies and avoid going into a long decline. Michigan is really very far gone.
Troy, any chance that California gets it where Michigan didn't?
Well, certainly not where unions are concerned. The fatal conceit that we made in the 60s and the 70s was allowing collective bargaining with public sector unions, and it has been a tremendous driver of the cost of government out here, and potentially the biggest time bomb here.
Explain that. What does that mean?
What does it mean that we gave them?
Yeah, and how it is just driving the cost up. Give me some examples of how that's working.
Okay. The fundamental difference with unions, unions are a legitimate way of organizing a labor force. The problem is when they get legal privileges, and it's fundamentally different with the public sector than it is versus the private sector, because you don't have anybody on the other side of the negotiating table who's necessarily dedicated to controlling costs.
Right.
And what we've seen over the course of the years is that this has really driven costs in places like our pension system. Now, a couple of years ago, we passed a law in California that allowed you, if you're a public safety employee, many of whom are wonderful people. We're talking cops and firefighters, and that's one of the reasons that it was easy to pass this. But you could retire after 30 years of service, with 90% of your annual salary.
They do it here in New York.
That's just not sustainable over the long term.
No. I mean, we see it in New York. First of all, they pay that in New York. God bless you if you're a cop. I don't know how you do it. You just have to make it to your 25 or 30 years, because they pay you garbage for a good portion of your tenure as a cop. Especially, I think they start. Does anybody know? Does it start like at $35,000 or $40,000? How do you live in New York City with a family for $35,000 a year? You can't do that. Mm-hmm. So you're getting people who. I mean, you're getting people who are, struggling to stay alive, and then you can retire. I know cops that came from New York and then went to another city. They're getting their full New York pension, 95% of their salary, and then they're working someplace else in another city, like Atlanta.
Right.
But generally speaking, though, public employee pensions and health care benefits far exceed those in the private sector.
Oh, yeah.
And we look in Washington, we say, oh, they're taking time bombs of Social Security and Medicare, pale in comparison, and in some level, to the ticking time bomb of public employee pensions at the state level. That is the real killer for many of these states, and those liabilities are going to continue on forever. And Troy hit on a good point. These public employee unions have a legal foothold, a legal handle on the tax payments for those of us going into the future. They have a real entitlement to our future tax payments, and as a result, many of these states are going to see more and more of their budgets going to pay for the benefits of now retired employees.
All right, back in just a second. We're going to talk about the good states and how to reset the system if it's possible. It doesn't make any sense. Put that chart back up on there. It doesn't make any sense. America, why would you want the peaks and the valleys on your income? Think of this not as a state, but as you. You want to have times when you buy a house and then all of a sudden your income just falls off and then shoots up and then falls off? Or would you rather have the steady climb? California is using, correct me if I'm wrong, most of their income or their revenue is on income, right? Texas doesn't have one. What the heck is wrong with us? What are we doing?